So what is one truth about your career that you rarely say out loud?
I feel like I'm an imposter in the room.
James White is CFO of ScanTech AI Systems, with over 2 decades in financial reporting and compliance, and a former senior manager at Ernst Young.
My father was one of the first Black CPAs in the state of Alabama, started a CPA firm headquartered in Alabama, still in operation today. But I wanted to be an engineer when I went to college. A systems engineer, industrial engineer. And I took chemistry. Chemistry told me, you don't want to be an engineer because you don't have the chops. I said, all right, I'll take that. And so, accounting kind of came in easy to me.
And so when you finally got into public accounting, you stayed like 20 years, which is a lot, because people either love it or they leave it within like 5 years.
So let's not kid ourselves. The profession, it's a grind. I had the fortune of being able to really form bonds with my teams. At the end of the day, wherever you end up, the people are what's going to make or break your experience.
That's so important though, because when you think about our curriculum, accounting and finance, there's nothing about leadership in it. There is nothing about people. Yeah. And then you get into the role and you realize the higher you go, it's all people.
It's all about people.
So how was your first week as a CFO?
What I realized very quickly was that there was so much to the job inside of a finance organization that had nothing to do with the actual numbers. The upside, though, is that building teams is what you do if you're in the audit world. You've got to build your team. You've got to monitor what everyone's doing and work through that.
It's crazy how those things kind of compound and help you be the leader you eventually are becoming.
Relish that, but I've always felt like I was an imposter in the room. I never felt like I was good enough.
I would not have thought, like looking at your resume and the things that, you on the AICPA console and all that stuff.
I was fortunate enough to have someone who realized that hard work and discipline was going to be the thing that would set me apart. Even if I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, I was going to try and outwork somebody to get to the right place. But I was a good auditor. I wasn't a great one. I was a good technician. I wasn't the greatest technician. And so there's some aspect to my personality, kind of how I operate, how I collaborate. Those are my stronger suits. You have to make yourself likable, right? Because that's who people want to work with, collaborate with. They want to work around with people that they like. You may not be the sharpest tack. They'll teach you the rest, but They want to see that you're there, you're committed, and the two, you have a bond. And once you've established that, things will work out for you. You'll get lucky.
But you create your luck, because it's something we don't want to admit, but people will pick who they like to work with. In interviews, in promotion.
You don't want to be the one that's just there on the sideline. Get engaged, make connections, because you'll realize later on in your career, it's going to be as much of who you know, but it's also going to be who knows you and what they know about you, right? Based off of your track record, based off of other people's word of mouth. And so that's really what's going to help drive. People are sitting in these rooms, they're making decisions on who do we want to be here or be there. It's going to be based off of that. That's a factor. It's a huge factor.
We are live in Atlanta. This is a diary of a CFO, and I'm your host, Wassia, Kamon. I've called this city home for over 2 decades, and it is one of the most important business hubs in the country. More than $2 trillion in payments flow through Atlanta every year, with an estimated 70% of all U.S. credit transactions touching the city. Yet most business conversations are still centered around places like New York or San Francisco. So this is a limited series where I'm sitting down with fellow finance leaders and CFOs to change that and see what's going on here, how they build their careers, what's working, what's different about doing it here, and how they carry the weight of these decisions. Today, I'm here with James White. James White is the CFO of ScanTech AI Systems, a company using AI to secure the world's infrastructure. But before, he was leading the finance function of a cutting-edge AI firm. He was a senior manager in the assurance practice at Ernst Young, EY, and is a multi-CPA who has seen the guts of multi-billion-dollar organizations from the outside, and now as CFO is get to build one from the inside. Welcome to the show, James.
Wassia, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we finally get to do this, especially because we officially met outside of Atlanta.
That's true.
In Las Vegas,
That's
of all places, at a conference.
For sure.
And to be here is I'm very happy for that.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. So I would like to start with what brought you to Atlanta?
So I grew up right next door. I'm an Alabama boy, born and raised. And so, growing up in Alabama, it's unique. It's a special experience. However, I knew that there was more outside of Alabama. So first chance I got out of the state. I graduated from the University of Maryland at College Park. But being in the DC, the DMV, right, area, I said, you know what, I don't miss the South as much as I thought I did, but wasn't ready to come back to Alabama. So Atlanta was, the next best choice for a myriad of reasons. And then growing up in Alabama, we all looked at Atlanta next door like, let's go have fun over there. So I said, okay, that's a great place to start a career. Wasn't too far from home, but it was just right.
Oh, good. And then the weather must be better too, because
depending on kind of what seasons you're looking for. I mean, summers here can be, they are what they are, right? Humidity is a thing, and it's a warm blanket for us all.
Yes, it is. And now, when you came here, did you already know you wanted to be in public accounting?
So yeah, I did actually. So kind of going back, when people ask me kind of like, who are you, right? I start with, I'm the great grandson of a pioneer, right? Over in Alabama. My dad's side of the family hails from Montgomery. And so, this is a generation coming off of the whole sharecropping and things of that nature, right? So, we had kind of, my grandfather had foresight to my great grandfather had foresight to kind of obtain a plot of land, and he actually built or put together the first kind of respite for people in the area where you couldn't go to public parks as being an African American in Montgomery County where we were. So he created kind of White's Lake, where that's where we could go to do picnics and kind of have different family reunions and stuff like that. So he created that for people. My grandfather, greatest man I've ever known, right? In the sense that, he came up through a hard time and really showed me kind of when you care about someone in your family, the things that you needed to do, right? My father was one of the first Black CPAs in the state of Alabama, started a CPA firm headquartered in Alabama, which kind of grew to about 5 offices at one point, still in operation today. And so, for the longest time, I thought accounting had something to do with music records because I heard he's doing something with records. I was like, he's in music, and it took me a while to figure out that had nothing to do with it. But I wanted to be an engineer when I went to college. I said, I'm going to be a systems engineer, industrial engineer. Then I took chemistry, and chemistry told me, you don't want to be an engineer because you don't have the chops. I said, all right, I'll take that. And so, accounting kind of came easy to me and said, okay, well, this is, Atlanta's where I wanted to start my career because I just kind of followed the path that so many of us are told. Get this degree in accounting, go work at a firm, get your CPA, and then, the rest will come to you after that.
Yes. And so when you finally got into public accounting, you stayed like 20 years, which is
I did.
which is a lot because people either love it or they leave it within like 5 years. So what kept you in public accounting that long?
Let's not kid ourselves. The profession is a difficult one. It's a grind, right? It always has been. And I had the fortune of being able to really form bonds with my teams.
Okay.
And so that's what kind of that makes, there's this adage in the military where they tell you to embrace the suck, right? So I was able to embrace the suck doing that. And, I forged a lot of great relationships. So it made the hard times more like this trial and tribulation that we were all going through. And so we could kind of bond over that. And, once I made it to manager, I, like most people, kind of had that point in my career where I was like, do I still want to keep doing this? Because I said to myself, I'm going to stay at least through senior. And then I would talk to people that were my mentors. They was like, well, look, you need to really stick it out until you make manager. And I had that same issue where I was like, what's here for me? And I had the fortune of being able to kind of change what I was doing inside the firm that kept it exciting, kept it dynamic. I was able to do a secondment to Berlin, Germany in 2005. So I lived in Berlin for 2005, 2008, serving one of the firm's marquee clients at the time. And so I was able to kind of keep reinventing myself the entire time. That's what kept me in. And frankly, the thing that really kept me there was I knew that there were people below me that were looking at what I was doing or what I had achieved, and that gave them value, right? That they said, look, if James is doing it, then I can get there too.
Yes.
And so that meant something to me. At the end of the day, wherever you end up, the people are what's going to make or break your experience. I'd say by and large for most
Oh,
people.
yes.
And so it meant something to me that I represented something for people and that kept me kind of in the firm. When there were days where I didn't want to do it that day, but I wasn't ready to kind of throw in the towel because I wanted to maintain kind of whatever that was, whatever I meant to whomever thought that my presence had some meaning. I said, okay, I'll stick it out for you.
Oh, wow. That is so inspiring, especially since I just learned that you work with Tiffany. That was Tiffany Willis. That was also on the podcast. So I can only imagine how inspiring it is to have that representation.
It's huge, because in the Atlanta office at the time, when we were kind of working through diversity and things of that nature, when I showed up, there weren't that many Black partners at EY, and at the time there were none in Atlanta. So a lot of us were sitting there trying to figure out, well, okay, is partnership a real thing for us? And then that started to kind of develop and evolve, and so I knew that there were people ahead of me. I was like, well, if he's here, then he can help kind of guide me on that path. And I knew eventually I would be doing that for other people as well. And so, I really believe that being in Atlanta as, an African-American really changes kind of the quality of your career because you don't really feel like you're on an island because, it's a chocolate city. This is how things are operating. So it's been a fantastic experience.
And now you went partner at your dad's firm.
Correct. So, I left EY circa 2015. And so I went back to the firm that my father started about 50 years ago and took over there as managing partner. My goal was to kind of take this wealth of information and experience that I had amassed and, really try and push us out of Gen 1 into Gen 2, right? Knowing that, I had this feeling that the landscape of the profession was going to change, right? Technology has always been rapidly evolving. And so, my goal was to kind of help, kind of take us to the next level. That would be great. Yeah.
And so from partner, because a lot of people is like, partner is it. Like, I'm going to be partner, I'm going to retire partner. At which point did you say, I want to come back, but not just in any public accounting? Like, you came and you switched to corporate finance and accounting after like 2 decades in public accounting. Like, what prompted the change?
So it was, there were a number of aspects to it, right? I think throughout my career, I've always tried to I embrace being uncomfortable throughout my entire career. Okay. I think, and it starts, right, the first time you show up at a new company. So, this goes back to when I was at Ernst Young. I said, okay, I showed up and I said, all right, I've got to be successful. What do I need to do to be successful? And I realized that I'm going to have to place myself in places where I may be the only, dark face in the room. And that's uncomfortable for me, but I've got to sort this out. And so to me, that was just kind of a training ground for any new challenge that I took on. For example, when I went to Germany on that secondment, didn't take any family, I went by myself. And so here I am, a young boy born in Alabama, and then you plot me down in the middle of Germany, not supposed to do that, right? That's not a choice that people would make. And I just kind of met it head on and said, okay, well, I'll figure it out and we'll go from there. So doing the things that I'm not supposed to do or people wouldn't expect me to do, I think has been part of my rite of passage, but it's been amazing. So, I said, I've never been a CFO. I believe that I can do it. I need the opportunity to do so. And then I'll figure out the rest, right? I had enough of a work ethic, because I grew up at, my dad's from Alabama. So he had this idea. He's like, well, I want to have a farm when he grows up, right? So naturally goes on, 100-acre farm. I grew up we had about 30 to 50 head of cattle, chicken coop. We had pigs at one point.
Nice.
And so 100 acres, as while other people are just waking up, and kind of getting dropped up at school, I got to get up at 6. I got to feed the cows, got to feed the chickens, got to feed the dogs. Then I go get ready and go to school. And so my father put a work ethic in me, whether I liked it or not, and so I've never looked at something as though the challenge is going to be too great. I just need to work hard enough to either get to the answer, get to a place where I'm comfortable, and kind of get there. And so all of that, I attribute a lot of that to my upbringing because I was fortunate enough to have someone who realized that hard work and discipline was going to be the thing that would set me apart. Even if I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, I was going to try and outwork somebody to get to the right place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's great. It's crazy how those things kind of compound.
They do.
And help you be the leader you eventually are becoming. So curious to hear what maybe other things that you think really helped you in your career.
It's funny, as mentees come to me, right? What I tell people is that, and I realized this kind of during my career, was that no one's preferences or biases are intentional, right? People have the tendency to do what's most comfortable for them. We take the path of least resistance whenever we can.
Yes.
So when I was at Ernst Young, my focus was on making myself as easy to get to know as possible, right? Finding as many common places as I could find with people in order for them to want to maybe invest in me, right? Because there were a number of times where you see people and they would struggle with being at the firm, and they're like, no one really talks to me, or, we're not relating on things. I was like, that's not their job to find a common place in you to relate to you. It's your job to find a common place where the two of you can connect on something, and then that'll kind of want them to kind of pour into you in that regard. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I approached every day and all the relationships that I had at the firm. So, that's kind of what I tell people. I was like, listen, you've got to find a way to become vulnerable, right? Because that's weird for us to kind of sit there and talk about your life with somebody who's a stranger, right?
Yes.
But you're trying to find just a little nugget, a little slice where the two of you can connect and something that you guys can talk about. And they're like, hey, I'm working on this thing. Have you dealt with this before? No. Well, come on, let me show you what I'm doing. And that changes your entire experience. Wow. 100%. And so I think that was a part of it, is that, look, you have to make yourself likable, right? Nobody has to, because that's who people want to work with, collaborate with, work around. They want to work around with people that they like. Now, you may not be the sharpest tack. They'll teach you the rest, but they want to see that you're there, you're committed, and the two of you have a bond. And once you've established that, things will work out for you. You'll get lucky at that point.
Yeah, but you create your luck, right? Because it's something we don't want to admit, but people will pick who they like to work with. Like in interviews, in promotions, 100%. In all that. It's almost like you want to hate the game all you want, but you're
still in the game.
You're still in the
game.
You're
still a player, right? Don't what is it? An MPU or whatever they call them? It's like you don't want to be the one that's just there on the sideline. Get engaged, right? Mm-hmm. Make connections, because you'll realize later on in your career, it's it's going to be as much of who you know, but it's also going to be who knows you and what they know about you, right? Based off of your track record, based off of other people's word of mouth. And so that's really what's going to help drive when people are sitting in these rooms, they're making decisions on who do we want to be here or be there. It's going to be based off of that. That's a factor. It's a huge factor.
It is. So I'm curious to hear, though, having spent, this much time in public industry, what is one thing that you really miss about that versus not?
Touche. So what I miss the people.
Okay.
Right. That really made it everything for me. There were times where, I was serving Coca-Cola was my kind of primary account when I was there. And so we bonded around, the war we felt like that we were going through to kind of meet these deadlines, get the numbers right, and get things out. And, look, I don't want to sit here and glamorize the suck, because, I don't want to lie to anybody and say, look, the profession is very difficult. The regulatory space is kind of very stringent right now. And so the magnitude that your errors can have on not only your personal career, firm reputation, so on and so forth, it's higher than it's ever been in that regard. So, that can't be lost. But the thing that really kind of changes the whole quality of that is you being able to form those relationships, right? And that translates to everything. I've as of late, I've had the opportunity, the honor really, to serve on the board of the AICPA. And so, again, that selection was based off of what I had done and the, being able to speak up, right, and have something important to say when people wanted to hear it, and then, garnering the respect of people that were in my circle. And so it's a distinct honor. But through that service, right, I'm continuing to form some very strong personal relationships. And so that's the most enriching part of it for me, is that that's what I get out of it, right? I'm giving, right, my time, whatever people think I know, right, and my perspective in order for us to kind of get to the right answer. But, I get as much out of it because I get to form these relationships, learn from all these other people and go from there. So it's that's what I miss. I miss kind of that collaboration with people. What do I miss, or what don't I miss? It's the hours. Let's be clear.
Okay.
Right? It's the hours. It's the politics of it, right? Because what you have to know is, look, their game is attrition, right? In terms of who rises to the top, and there's so many macro things that you can't control in terms of if someone does have aspirations to become a partner. A lot of it's going to be out of your control, right? Your timing may be bad, right? They may have made a bunch of partners the year before, and guess what? There's no room because the guys at the top don't want to retire yet. They're milking the kitty just the way they need to, and so it may not be your time, or you're going to have to wait longer. And I'm a very impatient person, so it's not.
Okay.
It doesn't work for me. I want what I want.
No, it's fair. It's fair because something has to give.
It does. It does.
Something has to give.
Absolutely.
So how was your first week as a CFO? I'm curious to hear, because as an auditor, your job is to, check what's wrong, make recommendation, and then you come in-house, and now it's your job to implement those recommendations and build. It's a total different game.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear what was that first month like for you coming from public accounting?
I was drinking through a fire hose,
Okay.
right? For sure, because I think it's contextual. I think it depends on what company you go into,
Okay.
kind of exiting audit, right? And even having done so many public company audits up to that time, what I realized very quickly was that there was so much to the job inside of a finance organization that had nothing to do with the actual numbers, right? When you're dealing with, depending on the size of the organization and whether you're public or not, you've got this whole finance aspect of it, right? From let's say if you don't have a large treasury organization, well, you're the treasury. You're treasury, then, right? So you're having to figure out finance and the nuances of finance, and is this, a good debt versus equity structure?
Yep.
Is this the right way to go? And so sometimes you're guessing, you're utilizing every resource you can. So, and then there's the whole securities and exchange aspect of it, which was, I thought I knew, finance, securities, and exchange, and then I realized how much I didn't know. So I had to roll up my sleeves and kind of really dig in there. And so that was the toughest part of it, is that, moving to the other side and learning all of the administrative aspect of all that piece in terms of getting your market data, getting your security data. How do you analyze it? What do you use it for? Those are the things that, you're not going to pick that up as a public company auditor. You're on the outside looking at some of the results of it, but not the machinations of it, right? And so that's the part where I really had to sharpen my pencil and really had to dig in and spend, a number of hours getting my hand wrapped around that. But, the upside, though, is that building teams is what you do. And, if you're in the audit world, and really throughout any aspect of working in a public company, once you get to the level of manager, senior manager, you've got to build your team. You've got to, kind of monitor what everyone's doing and work through that. And so that doesn't get lost. You still have that skill. And frankly, I had a lot of heavy engagement with NABA coming up as, a young senior and manager. Up through senior manager, I was president of the Atlanta chapter of NABA.
Oh, okay.
Probably the shortest stint because it was right on the beginning of me going on my secondment. So it made me president. I said, "Hey guys, I got to go. You guys got to find somebody else." They said, "Thank you for your service. You haven't done that much." So what I tell anybody is get engaged outside of your company where you can, because you're getting these invaluable reps at leadership, at working inside an organization, at motivating people to kind of help you when they're just giving their time gratis, right? Those are skills that you pick up that you wouldn't obtain just working inside your organization, or you won't get those opportunities until much further on down your career, and then it's brand new. So you've got this kind of storage, this kitty of information that you can draw from and put that out there. So,
and people too that you meet along the way.
Absolutely.
Like having more CFO friends that you can call. Like I have so many on speed dial. It's
right? You're like, have you seen this? Am I thinking about this the right way?
Yes.
Why do we do this? Right. And so, those are the type of questions you need, especially when you're in a situation where it's brand new to you and you're trying to figure out your way.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes. Curious to hear though, besides that, what did you have to like learn or unlearn once you came into industry?
There's a difference in the level of, at times, there's a difference in the level of motivation that I've experienced, right, with people in the finance organization. You come from a public accounting firm, by and large, we're all type A, we're driven, we want to impress. And so when you move outside of public to industry, it just may not be the same, right?
True.
So you're learning how to operate in an organization that isn't as driven or let's say focused on deliverables and results. And so you've got to find a way to motivate people. And so, I read a lot of Sun Tzu's Art of War as a kid. And I say as a kid, when I was probably in my 20s, I read that a couple of times. I read Machiavelli, The Prince, because I wanted to understand, how do I get people to move in a way. I realized you had to find out what's important to them, right? So being a leader, to be a good leader, I believe you have to listen to your people, get to know your people so that you can understand, because compensation can't be the only motivation factor, right?
True.
You'll get what you pay for, and depending on how, what role it is, exactly that, right? And so you have to find a way to kind of connect with people, almost to where I had people that I worked for during my career that I would run through a brick wall for, because I believed in them. I wanted them to be successful. And so you have to find a way to be that for other people. And that's only through connection. That's only through people feeling as though you care about them, not just what they do. And that will motivate them to go the extra mile for you. That's been my experience. Or that's how I've tried to lead. Successful or not, I'll let you know.
That's so important though, because when you think about our, curriculum, accounting and finance, there's nothing about leadership in it. There is nothing about, psychology, or everything is like, even when you look at the different classes, accounting 101, 102, financial management, cost accounting, there is nothing about people. No. And then you get into the role and you realize, even in public accounting, like the higher you go, it's all people.
It's all about people. It's all about people. And look, maybe I was smart enough back then, right, to kind of dig into this aspect of it. There's a book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, that I read post-graduation that really helped me understand what motivates people in the different levels of leadership. And because you've got to know how good you can be, right? Because supposedly there's a ceiling in terms of how good of a leader you can be, right? Because if you're a 10 on the leadership scale, then you can attract 10 talent, right? But if you're just a 5, then you've got to be able to recognize what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, how do you move there, and how do you work on those other skills in order to become a better leader. And so you're right. The people aspect of it is not taught. It's only learned. But there's tons of resources out there for you to do it. You just got to put in the time and the effort and really want that for or that aspect of your career. And listen, here's what you got to know. That's going to change, right? I'm a father, and I'm a father first and foremost, right? So, she's 9 years old now, and, she's my new why, right? And so, I think I was mentioning to you that, at this point in my career, if I never receive another accolade, if no one else ever knows my name, when this is all said and done, the only thing that I want is for her to want to spend time with me when she's out in the world, right? Wow. Like that's the only value I have. everything else is icing on the cake, right? I want to be who she needs me to be. And I really won't let anything detract from that, because that's my primary focus, right? I want to do a good job. I want to provide for my family. But that's who I am today, right? I happen to be a CFO. I happen to be in the accounting profession, but I want to be known by her as a fantastic father and someone that she looks up to. And that's it. Everything else is easy after that.
Wow, that's beautiful, because a couple years ago, in the grind, I wanted to become a CFO and all that. I think I was VP of Finance and Accounting. I told you that. And I was working late one day because at the time, the company I was working for was based in San Francisco, which meant when I woke up, they were still asleep.
Yep.
And so by 6 p.m. here, it was just 3 p.m. there. So I had longer days. So, and I'm the cook. I don't have a wife. I have a husband who doesn't cook.
Now.
So it wasn't like, so he had to step in a little bit. And, stepping in, it was just what you get. Chick-fil-A. He cooked Chick-fil-A. We cooked Chick-fil-A a lot during those times.
Good job.
But what I remember so vividly is she came one day and she was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm an accountant." And she said, "That's what it is. I don't want to do that when I grow up." And it broke my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
real.
it completely changed how I work, because I thought I was good at setting boundaries, but hearing it from my child, I was like, oof.
Tells you everything. From the mouths of babes is what they say.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it completely changed, how I showed up, the thing I said yes to, and how I responded to her. But it completely changed me on that leadership side of how I was spending my time.
Yep. No.
And it's so profound when you said, at the end of the day, like, what is your new why and how it changes. But for others who, may not have kids or, still want to grow on that leadership side, you mentioned resources. You mentioned you obviously read a lot of books, because you mentioned like 5 books already. But what are other things that you think can help people like find that healthy balance, right? Because you don't want to be all in of, I work all these hours, I make all this money, and I have no life.
Yeah.
Well, I have a life and I'm broke. like how do you, debits and credits, right? What have you found really helped in that?
In terms of striking balance?
Yes.
No is a powerful word. It's a complete sentence, right? I've always struggled with not taking advantage of the opportunities that were presented for me. I would always say yes, right? And so I think there's a time for that in your career, right? Where you absolutely say yes to everything, right? Say yes to the projects, and it'll pay dividends. But I think that, and I'm envious of this new generation a little bit, in the sense that their career doesn't define them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I think that's fantastic, because, I believe that the older generations, that who they were, right, is what defines who they are in the world. And that's a heavy handcuff to put on yourself, right? That's a heavy cross to carry. So in kind of finding the balance, I heard there's a story that's out there where I think it was a teacher giving a seminar, and they got this big glass jar, and they put a bunch of heavy rocks into it, right? It's like, is it full? And you continue to put things in. You add smaller pebbles, and then sand, and then water, right? Key there is you start with the things that are most important in your life. Every person has to go through that evaluation on their own. And here's the thing, it will shift, right? Because when I first started, I just wanted money, opportunity, because the money allowed me to do the other things I like to do, right? I grew up in Alabama, so I like to go hunt, I like to go hang out with my friends, right? I grew up having a bush hog, 100 acres as a kid. So, like, those are the things that I like to do outside of work. And so, but as I went along, my why changed, right? It was, okay, well, my relationships became more important, right? So I had to kind of move things around. Does that mean you may have to kind of take, a lesser role at work, or kind of ride out a position a little bit longer and not get that next promotion because this is more important? You have to constantly go through the process. What's important to you, right? And how, and if that's important to you, are you serving it properly? And if not, you got to be strong enough to make the changes to do so. And so that's what I would tell anybody, right? But you've got this luxury, and that those first, call it 10 years of your career, go all out, focus on this, look up in 10 years, and then you would have obtained this capital, individuals, right? This knowledge repository that you've gained, right? You allow people to pour into you. Start there, right? And after that, then you can start making some of those harder decisions in life. I didn't think about kids, before I turned 30. Now, mind you, if you'd asked me in college, I was going to have 3 kids by the time I was 28. Well, life has a funny way of showing you that. That's really not in the
my husband
cards.
and I were gonna have 4 kids. We have 2.
Right? So it just didn't play out for me in that way. But I wouldn't trade it for the world at this point. And there are times where, it's so good now. I was like, well, why didn't I do this earlier? Well, look, God has a funny way of saying, he's like, I'll give you what you're ready for. And I was not ready prior to then. But, and look, it's afforded me to be a better father, I know, today than I would have been, 10 if we had started 10 years earlier, right? So that, and you'll hear me talk about, family and my daughter a lot in almost every conversation that I have, because that's my guiding light, right? And so I have the fortune of having that now. Now, again, going back to kind of the people that aren't there in their path, really plot out where you want to be, how you want to live your life. Because when all this is said and done, the organization will probably still be there when you retire or leave, right? All of this will still be around when it's over. And so you've got to answer to somebody, and it's going to be the person in the mirror, right? Does that really enrich you? Is that the value that you want to have in your life? Right? Sound like a motivational speaker, but I mean, I think this is real because, I was sharing with you one thing that really touched me not too long ago was it was a short of a guy, I think he was a multimillionaire or billionaire. They were asked, he's kind of this conversation where he says, listen, you go through all these accolades, you go through this career, you amass all this money, you amass all these resources. And at the end of it, if, because you were taken away from your family for so much that your grown children don't seek you out to spend time with you, then, what was it worth at the end of the day? I won't, that's the one price I'm unwilling to pay when this is all said and done, right? So she showed up, all right, this is it. She'll get everything, from this point forward. Most importantly, she'll get my attention whenever she wants it. That to me,
priceless,
makes everything after that. I don't know that I really care. I want to do a good job. I don't want to sully my name by not being there for the roles that I have. But none of that can take away from her at the end of the day. So look, I'm fortunate in that I have a why. I love it. I enjoy it, but I won't give that up.
Oh, that is so nice. And so one of my last questions is for the senior managers here that are in audit, for example, that want to make the move into industry, what would be your advice to them?
So first thing I tell them is really evaluate, don't take your first opportunity, right? Really evaluate the culture of the company, right? Because you have to understand you're coming from, if let's say you were at one of the top 50 firms in the country. You are coming from a very well developed organization and structure. And so you have to really say to yourselves, and so you've been in this real comfortable kind of environment and blanket for the longest time. So do your due diligence, not just on the company, its metrics, so on and so forth, but the culture of the organization. Right? So a lot of times you'll get that first nod. You're like, all right, yep, this is my opportunity. I get to go be a CFO. Because it can change kind of the context of that. You'll end up, you can go into a very entrepreneurial situation, right? A organization, let's say, maybe they're 5 to 7 years old. You're on the ground floor. It's a great opportunity, but you've got to know that going in.
Yeah.
So you really have to kind of do some real introspection and say, okay, yep, I'm gonna put my head down And what am I sacrificing at the time that I do that? Who are you doing it for? Do they understand that? Are you having those conversations? Now, if you're, single, senior manager coming out, drive forward, right? But what I tell people is never lose sight of the people that are also in your circle. If you have a family, open that conversation up, right? Like, yeah, it's on your shoulders to support your family, but open that conversation up. Let everybody understand the sacrifice that's about to happen so they buy in on it. So you're not carrying an extra cross while you're going out there doing it. That's what I tell people.
That's such a great advice.
Yeah.
I wish I had that years ago. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, because I read the first 90 days book, and it was talking about how, like, before you hop into any role, you need to make sure you're not trying to plan a big move, like something major going on, because your attention will focus and you can really put a stress on those relationships. And I didn't realize how much that meant, but that's such a great advice.
Yeah, people have to buy into your plan.
Yes.
And so every household is different, right? But having that buy-in and that support at the end of the day will really make it a more meaningful relationship, and for them to take the ride with you, as opposed to you're looking at them in the rear view while you're out doing what you're doing, right? Because that can get lost. I mean, going back to kids, right? All they want is your presence and your attention, right?
Yes.
And so now look, in hindsight, right? My father, like I said, started a CPA firm in Alabama, right? Which was minority-owned CPA firm, which is unheard of. He served as revenue commissioner of the state of Alabama under George Wallace, right? And then director of finance under Jim Folsom, right? So he was gone a lot, right? And so I have the benefit of having gone through that experience, but I also have an absolute appreciation for what it was able to provide for me, right, down the line. And so, yeah, there was a sacrifice. We did have a conversation about him going to work for George Wallace, right? Because naturally, George has got his own story. And so, the trust I had in my father was that he explained to me, he's like, listen, George is not the same man that he was. And that's why I'm doing this, for a number of reasons. So I understood sacrifice as a child in the benefit of a greater good that a lot of people didn't have to experience. But I'm also mindful of what that does on the back end to the family. And so I don't have anything negative to say about, my upbringing, my childhood, because it's provided me everything where I am today, given me great opportunities. And I've done my best to take full advantage of those opportunities and not squander them, because I knew that there was sacrifice made all along the way to get there. And it means a lot to me, right? And so that was important. But, at the same time, I sit here and say, I don't know that I want, my daughter to ever experience that. But if we do, that's going to be a conversation that we're going to have. And because I want her buy-in, because she's got to always remember she's the most important thing. I was like, Daddy won't do this if this doesn't, pan out. Or, we'll have a longer conversation where I get her on my side eventually.
Try.
Yeah, I will attempt. She's the boss.
So what is one truth about your career that you rarely say out loud?
So it's starting to be said more. And I've said this in a number of rooms. I said it at my new board member orientation for the AICPA. We went through the orientation. We kind of go through the first meeting, and we're having kind of a hot wash, a debrief at the end of the meeting. And my comment was, I feel like I'm an imposter in the room. Wow. And I realized I'd started to feel that throughout most of my career when people selected me to do things, because I was shocked that I got the opportunity. And when you start looking at the people that are with you, you say to yourself, well, I'm not them. Why am I here? Should I be here? And that'll happen as you progress through your career, where you get invited into these more important rooms. You're sitting down at the table where critical decisions are being made. And that, I've started to kind of talk about that. And it's starting to get coined a lot more.
Yes.
This imposter syndrome, where you're like, I don't know why I'm here, but you have to shake that as soon as possible. Acknowledge it, because that humility is what's going to benefit you, because it's going to help you ask questions. Like if you don't know, somebody else may not know as well. So never take that for granted. So relish that. But yeah, no, I've always felt like I was an imposter in the room. I never felt like I was good enough. Other people perceived that I was, because they thought that I had some value. And so I have to rest on those laurels. So don't second guess yourself. Do the work. Put in the effort after you're there to prove it to yourself. Because if you're proving it to yourself, everyone else is going to see it. They're going to see the effort. They're going to see the engagement. They're going to see the participation. And it'll continue to pay dividends. But you have to shake that off. But I've always felt like an imposter in the room. Because I've worked with, some very intelligent people. I was a good auditor. I wasn't a great one, right? I was a good technician. Wasn't the greatest technician. And so there's some aspect to either my personality, kind of how I operate, how I collaborate. Those are my stronger suits. And so, that kind of keeps me engaged with people, knowing that I'll kind of find the answer. And I don't have it in the beginning, but, shake that off. But yeah, my biggest truth is like, I've always felt like an imposter, but it works because it compels you to drive a little bit harder to shake that out of yourself. And the benefits are exponential after that.
Wow.
I think it runs from there.
That's amazing, because I would not have thought, like looking at your resume and the things that, you on the AICPA council and all that stuff.
A blind dog finds a bone every now and then, right? And a broken clock is right twice. So listen, my goal there is to ensure that they're not wrong about their choice, right? When you're given the opportunity, make them right. Right.
Yes.
If you have that in the back of your mind, you're going to be successful. If your goal is just to prove them right in their choice, because at the moments where you think you're supposed to be there, I think that's when you start to falter. Don't try as hard. You don't, because, hey, I'm supposed to be here. Are you? Well, you've got to prove that every day, right? That's what it is. You're number one in the world in whatever you do. Be it whatever sport you play, yeah, you got to the top. You got to prove it every day. And, which means you got to work twice as hard.
Yep.
Otherwise, it will go away. They'll take it away from you. Right?
Wow.
So prove it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. My last question, curious to hear, what is your favorite thing to do on the weekend here in Atlanta?
As you can see, I take up a little bit of space, so food will be involved, right? Yeah, signify to that. Look, the reason I love this city is because it's a cultural mecca, right?
Yeah.
And so what I love to do is find a new restaurant, something I haven't been to, and try and introduce my daughter to some new cuisine. Try and break her out of, dino chicken nuggets.
Oh gosh.
And, right now she's a noodle fiend.
Okay.
Right? If it's, be it Asian or Italian, if there's noodles in the dish, game on. She's in. So, and unfortunately, I've gotten her introduced to duck, right? So,
nice.
duck's on her menu, but I can't get her to eat, pork chop. So, go figure. I still don't understand it, but just raising the bar. So it'll be spending time with family, trying a new meal or something like that. But listen, this city's amazing. It's continuing to flourish as a financial, cultural epicenter, not just in the Southeast, but nationwide. Yes. We've got to continue to kind of foster that and bring more companies here in that regard. But it's an amazing place. I don't know that I would have wanted to raise my child anywhere else because it's, such a diverse and kind of open city. So, food will be involved for sure.
Same here. Like I'm planning my husband's Father's Day weekend. You think it's my weekend because I'm planning it around the things I like. So.
Listen, what dads realized a long time ago is that nothing belongs to us anymore. Our birthdays don't belong to us anymore. Father's Day, it's low on the list of important holidays. So the fact that it gets remembered is our only win at the end of the day.
It's not that bad. I mean, he also likes it. Yeah.
That's what he says. I'll leave that there. I'll leave that right there.
Okay.
He said it. Yeah. Right? He's like, if he wants to sleep peacefully, I know he had a good time, didn't he? That's
Yes.
right. He was like, yes, you did.
Yes,
He
yes.
said, baby, this was the best one yet.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show,
This
Chase.
is fantastic. I appreciate it. You made this very a warm environment. I'll be honest with you. I'll go ahead and say this. I had a lot of trepidation, being on camera first time. I share it with you. I'll say this out loud in my head. I sound like Barry White, all right? However, I've been told I lean more Kevin Hart. And so I've got to accept that. And when this plays back, I've got to go through a whole soul searching thing and just come to acceptance. So please be kind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Does that work?
Yes.
I broke her, people. I broke her.
Yes, you did.
Mission accomplished.
You did.
There we
You
go.
did. Okay.
We're gonna get to the outro. It's coming. We're gonna close here in a second, but all right.
Okay. We're gonna record this. So
Leave that in. Leave it in.
Drink
No edit.
something?
I've been wanting to say that for a long time. Leave it in.
It will be left in.
There we go. All right.
Thank you, sir.
That's it for this episode. I think I'm ready.
We had to take like 30 minutes before we started this episode because this man is too funny. I know you acted serious most of the episode, but guys,
I did my best, but now
that's it.
we're off the rails. Let's go.
That's it for today's episode of Live from Atlanta, the Diary of a CFO. I love doing this in person. You can definitely feel the difference. So subscribe and share this with someone who needs it, and I'll see you in the next one.
And we're out.